with not one, but two different inmates. And she really was just a dealer posing as a cop. Who else were some of the most corrupt cops we covered in 2024? Who were a few of the most corrupt cops around? Let's get right to it, starting with number 7, thieving cops. 3 police officers conducted a search on an apartment, and instead of arresting criminals, 3 of the officers involved in the search were charged with theft. The stupid thing is that the evidence that was used against the thieving cops was their own body cameras. Funny how that works. This group of Texas police officers, consisting of Constable Curtis Traylor Harris, Chief Deputy LaQuenda Banks, and Sergeant Derek Holman, were supposed to carry out a routine eviction. The job was simple. The officers would get the keys from the resident, search the property for any evidence of illegal activities, and then begin the process of evicting the resident. You'd think veteran officers would be up to this task. For some reason, the 3 officers forgot to turn off their cameras. So when they got into the apartment, they treated it like an all-you-can-steal buffet. They took Ray-Bans, birth certificates, 4 watches, a pair of Oakleys, antique coins, and even military medals. The resident also claimed $750 in cash was missing from the house. And one of the officers even had the gall to brag about what they were going to get from what they were taking. To make sure the resident was none the wiser, the officer said that they had found loads of illegal substances in her apartment and told her not to come in. Then the video got out and they all lost their jobs. Somehow, 2 of the dirty cops just got probation sentences and paid some fines, while the 3rd one was found not guilty by a jury. None of them ever saw the 4 walls of prison as a result of the crime. Number 6, excessive force. Officer James Brennan got himself in a bit of a pickle after he discharged his service weapon at a teenager who was eating a burger in his car in a parking lot. The whole situation escalated beyond what anyone would expect. The teenager, Eric Cantu, was just eating peacefully in his vehicle when Officer Brennan approached, opened the door, pointed his weapon at Eric, and told him to get out of the car. Cantu, who wasn't expecting to suddenly have a weapon in his face, freaked out, so he tried backing up, which led to the car door hitting Officer Brennan. This must have lit a fuse in the officer's head, and so he started firing at Eric as he attempted to get away. And it gets worse. Apparently, there was a second individual in the car, a woman named Emily Prue. So Officer Brennan risked the lives of innocent bystanders. Cantu was seriously injured by the rounds and was hospitalized for weeks on life support. Clearly, his road to recovery has been long and difficult. So why did this officer do what he did? As it turns out, he was sent to the parking lot after a complaint about some sort of disturbance. Of course, the officers saw no disturbance, but noticed Eric's car. He then told dispatch he thought it was a stolen vehicle he had recently pursued in a separate incident a couple days before. Brennan was fired shortly after the incident and charged. Brennan continued to insist that his actions were somehow justified. But as of the release of this video, the case is still ongoing. We're not entirely sure what his justification is going to be for using that amount of force on a kid eating a burger, though. But from where we're sitting, it's not looking good. Number 5, officer shoplift. Officer David Griffin bit off more than he could chew and resigned from the police force as a result. You'd never expect police officers to be involved in something as petty as shoplifting. But Griffin doesn't care what you'd expect of a police officer. Griffin and his accomplice, Shelby Dubose, walked into a store and behaved like regular shoppers. However, when it was time to leave the store, they scanned some items at the self-checkout point, but didn't scan others. One of the employees at the store noticed this and asked Griffin to fix the innocent mistake that we've all made. So Griffin was like, sure. But as the employee walked away, he continued to just bag items he hadn't scanned. He probably thought this was just some suggestion he could ignore, kind of like stop signs late at night. But he was wrong. Griffin and DuBose eventually finished bagging all the scanned and unscanned items and were about to exit the store when they discovered that someone had notified security. The police were alerted, and before Griffin knew it, he was no longer the upstanding family guy that people expected police officers to be. He was promptly arrested, and he then resigned from the police force. But that wasn't the end of his troubles. Walmart security officials checked the security cams to see if this was a regular thing for Griffin, and they found out that he had committed the same crime on 4 other occasions with his trusty sidekick. Thankfully, Griffin is no longer a part of the police force and has now been charged with 5 counts of retail petty theft, which is a second-degree misdemeanor. DuBose was also charged with 4 counts of the same crime. Number 4, jaywalking escalated. Officer Joshua McFall drove into oncoming traffic, pulled in front of a 34-year-old mother of 5, and then slammed her into a wall before arresting her because she was jaywalking. Finally, someone is addressing the huge jaywalking problem that's destroying our cities. Seriously, who arrests someone for jaywalking? Officer McFall was in his vehicle waiting for a traffic light to turn green when Christina Porter walked across the road right in front of him. At that exact moment, the lights turned green and McFall beeped at her, so she waved at him as if to say he should chill and continued on her way. However, McFall wasn't exactly Mr. Chill, so he turned on his emergency flashers and went after her. He claimed he told her to stop, but she had some headphones on, so she probably didn't hear him. So McFall pulled ahead of her, got out of his vehicle, and then smashed her against the wall. He used so much force that she got a separated shoulder, nerve damage, back pain, neck pain, and a concussion. McFall, on the other hand, said that the only reason he used so much force was because he was apparently in fear for his life, which is weird, since there were several other officers either on the scene or on their way. McFall said he thought Porter was pulling a weapon from her purse, which is also weird because he was the one who asked for identification, and wouldn't you know it, she kept her ID in her purse. He must have thought she should just be carrying it around in her hand at all times. The insane thing is that the crime that Porter was getting arrested for, jaywalking, no longer exists in its widely understood form. According to California law, people can only be arrested for jaywalking if there was an imminent risk of collision, which clearly wasn't the case here. To make things worse, witnesses at the scene said that Porter wasn't actually even jaywalking, since the pedestrian green light was still on when she crossed, and she was in a crosswalk. The whole incident understandably traumatized Porter severely, and she has since filed a lawsuit. Remember when people made jokes about getting arrested for jaywalking? This dude's way too bored, or clearly had some other dumb vendetta. Hopefully, justice gets served. Number 3, cop steals from the past. Officer Steve Hortz responded to a 911 call concerning the passing of an elderly man, and then returned days later to steal stuff from the house. And the crazy thing is that Steve did all of this while wearing his sheriff's uniform. He was so arrogant about his theft that he didn't even bother changing his clothes. And to make things worse, he didn't just return to the home to steal once, he went back 3 different times. Hortz, who was a 12-year veteran of the Orange County Sheriff's Department, responded to a 911 call concerning the passing of a 70-year-old man from natural causes. While responding to the call, Hortz took a good look at the now unoccupied home and must have thought that no one would miss a few things if he grabbed them. A week after responding to the call, Hortz returned to the house and broke into it through the rear, leaving a short while later. For some reason, this dude didn't notice the CCTV camera at the front door tracking his movement. So the camera had a great view of him while he was wearing his uniform. Almost 2 weeks later, Hortz returned. This time, he was in his civilian clothes and was under the cover of darkness. He was then caught on camera leaving the house with more stolen items. Hortz returned 6 days later to grab even more items from the unoccupied home. Officers investigating the incident found that Hortz had grabbed 2 safes, ceiling fans, and a bunch of other valuables. Further investigations revealed that the same month, he'd also stolen 3 credit cards from the home of another woman who had recently passed away. Hortz was eventually arrested and ended up serving probationary sentences for his crimes. Number 2, a crime of degrees. Officer Morteza Amiri paid someone to go to an online college for him so that he could qualify for a pay raise from his employer, the Antioch Police Department. However, the scam ended up uncovering a pretty big scandal within the department. Like most departments, the police department Amiri worked for had an incentive program offering pay raises to officers who had successfully completed their undergraduate studies. Since Amiri didn't have his degree, but still wanted that delicious pay raise, he decided to find a solution. And what was that solution? Pay someone to take the classes for him. Amiri's major was criminal justice, and maybe if he had attended his classes, he would know not to discuss the details of his scam through text. Apparently, Amiri regularly texted the person taking the classes for him and told them he would pay per class. He also asked the guy not to tell a soul about it, and those texts were eventually used as evidence against Amiri at his trial, so apparently a soul was actually told. Amiri wasn't the only one running this scam either. 5 other officers were in on it. If only they had stopped for a moment to consider that a police department would probably have ways to catch people who tried to scam it. And the degree scam wasn't the only legal trouble Amiri ran into. During his time as an officer, he was part of the K-9 unit, and his job was basically to let his dog loose on criminals. But Amiri took it a step farther and took pictures of the dog bites his dog inflicted and kept them as trophies, which is weird. He was also accused of using excessive force, bragging about it, and covering it up by doctoring police reports. As a consequence of his actions, including his involvement in the pay raise scam, Amiri was convicted, and as of the release of this video, faces up to 20 years in prison, with his sentence yet to be passed down. Number 1, dirty cop steals from dealers. Officer Frene Kanat got into a world of trouble when he thought that he could steal money from suspects just because he had a weapon and a badge. Kanat thought he was just on his regular patrol, but he had no idea what he was dealing with when he ran into undercover police officers. It was a regular case of catching flies with honey, as the FBI already got a tip that Kanat stole money and merchandise from criminals. They knew that he then distributed the stolen goods for even more profit. According to the FBI, the gig was pretty simple. He would wear his uniform, get into his squad car, and conduct traffic stops on suspected dealers who he'd then rob. But our dirty cop was also pretty smart. He never actually pulled this when he was on duty, and always did it outside his own jurisdiction so he could avoid suspicion. So the FBI sent a couple undercover agents who acted like they had just completed a deal while the officer watched. Once the deal was completed, Kanat followed the agent with the money and stopped him. He gave the agent 2 options. He could either hand over the bag with the money or go to jail. The agent shook his head and handed over the bag, and just like that, Kanat's fate was sealed. After the deal, the FBI recorded him talking to an FBI informant where he discussed the logistics of another robbery. This time, he wouldn't just steal money, but product as well. And he would pass that product off to an informant who would help him sell it and then would share the profits. However, Kanat didn't know that this gig was also a sting. He walked into the deal blind and did the same thing he had done to the previous agent. He collected the money and then collected the illegal substances. Then he arranged to meet his informant to share the goods and money. And boom goes the dynamite. Kanat ended up getting sentenced to over 11 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to his charges. Who are some of the most scandalous prison officers around? Let's find out, starting with number 6, the neck ordeal. Melissa Goodwin, a former prison officer, got herself tangled up in a bit of a mess. Turns out, she was caught having personal relationships with not one, but two inmates, Corey London and Caleb Valeri, who had ties to a motorcycle gang. Now Melissa's trying to shake off her past and land a job in counterterrorism. But there's a problem. She's got this pretty gnarly tattoo on her neck that she thought might hurt her chances. So she underwent some seriously painful laser tattoo removal sessions to clean up her look. Back in 2021, Melissa managed to avoid jail time by owning up to her involvement with one of the inmates who was a teenager at the time. Instead, she got hit with a community corrections order and had to put in some hours of community service. Not exactly a walk in the park, but better than being behind bars where she probably should have been. And then there's the drama with Caleb, who was associated with the Rebels motorcycle gang. Things went south real quick between the two, with accusations flying around about a biting incident during an argument. Messy stuff for sure, but Melissa's putting it all behind her, rebranding herself as a feminist influencer and leaving her prison days in the rearview mirror. Melissa's definitely had her fair share of ups and downs, but it would seem like her judgment would be questionable at best. Hey, we're not saying she can't be in a relationship with whomever she chooses. Maybe both inmates were actually innocent and really great guys? Number 5, inappropriate connections. Rachel Martin was a prison officer at HMP Guy's Marsh, a men's prison in the UK. HMP stands for Her Majesty's Prison, if you didn't know. Got in trouble after getting involved in a romantic roller coaster with inmate Raymond Abraham. Between November of 2020 and March of 2021, she sent him thousands of steamy texts, along with packages containing designer clothes and, oddly enough, women's underoos. Even further, she received over £12,000 from him, bragging to a friend that her bills were sorted for the foreseeable future. But her shady dealings came crashing down when a routine search turned up a remote control adult toy in her jacket pocket, followed by a scandalous discovery in Abraham's cell. Officers found a mobile phone, USB sticks, and even some risque snapshots of Martin herself. After claiming she got sick at work and then promptly resigning, Martin's little fling took a brief hiatus, only to resume shortly after. Talk about commitment issues, huh? What's wild is that Martin had just finished an 8-week training stint where she ironically learned about conditioning, manipulation, and corruption awareness. The irony is thicker than mud, folks. Fast forward to April 1st, 2021, and no, this isn't an April Fool's joke, and the cops swoop in, uncovering a stack of cash, fancy receipts, and not one, but 2 phones loaded with messages and calls that would make your pastor faint. So what was Martin's defense? She played the classic "I was groomed" card, citing her recent breakup and her emotional vulnerability. Her lawyer even argued that Abraham was like a seasoned pro at this game, targeting her in her moment of weakness and showering her with cash for goodies. In the end, though, Martin pleaded guilty to 9 counts of misconduct and got a not-so-fabulous 16-month vacation in the slammer. Lesson learned: be careful who you swipe right for, especially if they're behind bars. Number 4, loving inmates. A prison officer named Emma Johnson landed herself in jail for sneaking iPhones to an inmate she had the hots for, Marcus Solomon. They were raking in cash and even had cute little conversations about it. Emma would tip off Marcus whenever there was a cell search coming up, giving him a heads up to stash the iPhones. But their sneaky operation came crashing down when a phone with Emma's digits was nabbed from an inmate. After getting busted, it was revealed that Emma and Marcus were deeply in cahoots. They were cahooting, if you will, chatting about their phone smuggling antics left and right. They both pleaded guilty to conspiring to sneak phones into the slammer. Emma even admitted to money laundering. Derby Crown Court threw the book at Emma, slamming her with a 15-month jail stint, while Marcus got 13 months added on to his current sentence. Talk about a tough break. Their love story started when Emma was a prison officer at HMP Sudbury, where Marcus was doing time. But things got messy when Marcus got moved to another joint because everyone thought Emma Emma was spending a little too much quality time with him. The court heard Emma was also cozying up to another inmate who happened to have a phone in his cell, with Emma's number saved in it, no less. During sentencing, the judge made it clear that Emma's actions were a massive breach of trust. And let's be real, smuggling phones into prison, that's obviously a big no-no. Emma's lawyer tried to soften the blow, insisting she thought her love with Marcus was the real deal. But the judge wasn't buying it, pointing out Emma's messages urging Marcus to hustle those iPhones and giving him the heads up about searches. Now Emma's out of a job and bouncing around gigs, while Marcus moved on with a new squeeze and a new baby. And yet, this is still a better love story than Twilight. Number 3, harboring escapees. Chloe Jones, a former prison officer, got herself into quite the pickle by falling head over heels for an inmate, Philip King. Now, this wasn't your run-of-the-mill crush either. Chloe let Philip crash at her place after he broke out of the clink. Chloe first crossed paths with Philip when she started working at a prison in Liverpool. Their innocent hellos soon turned into something more as they swapped over 3,000 texts while Philip was doing time. When Philip made a daring escape from prison in July of 2017, Chloe didn't hesitate to lend him a helping hand. She let him shack up at her parents' house and even let him borrow her car. Meanwhile, she kept her lips sealed about their romance to her bosses. But their love story took a wild turn when they got caught up in a police chase through Liverpool 4 months later in November of 2017. The chase did come to an end with both arrested, but Chloe tried to pull a fast one and gave Philip a fake name. But the name fooled no one, and the jig was up when she came clean the next day. While Chloe got a taste of the slammer herself after the chase, she managed to escape charges initially. However, the law eventually caught up with her, and in October of 2018, she was back in cuffs and later charged with misconduct in a public office. Despite Chloe's claims that her relationship with Philip was all about love, the judge wasn't buying it. He slapped her with a 15-month prison stint on account of the seriousness of her breach of trust. Chloe may have thought her prison stint would be a breeze too, but it turns out it wasn't quite the school trip she assumed it was going to be when she was dropped off at an old-fashioned house instead of a cell block. Now she's facing the consequences of her actions, while Philip serves out an extended sentence for his part in the escapade. As for HMP Alt Course, Chloe's prison, they claim they're not messing around when it comes to maintaining order. They've made it clear they won't tolerate any funny business from their staff and will work closely with law enforcement to keep their house in order. Number 2, 1 year sick. 3 prison guards working at Rikers Island took part in a massive sick leave scheme and received hundreds of thousands of dollars from New York City taxpayers. The trio comprised of Monica Coaxum, Eduardo Trinidad, and Stephen Cange. Coaxum and Trinidad were engaged. How's the saying go? The couple that defrauds together is outlawed together? He was full of great relationship advice like that. Another one was, if she's gonna scam, then she'll steal you a ham. That man loves his hams. All 3 claimed sick leave for extended periods while still collecting their regular salaries. Stephen Cange was out of work from March 2021 to May 2022, but still received his full salary of roughly $160,000. He claimed he was suffering from vertigo and adverse side effects from the COVID vaccine. During this time, Cange devoted himself to working on his graphic novel, Cure of Utopia, which was released in 2021. Around that time, law enforcement officers saw him perform daily activities without signs of being unwell or injured. Trinidad reported multiple injuries between June 2021 and November 2022. Whenever he had appointments with city officials, he wore a sling or walked with a cane. Like Cange, he received his full salary, which was over $140,000. He might have gone out of his way to look injured in front of city officials, but pictures surfaced of Trinidad performing household repairs without any signs of physical distress. Coaxum also faked injuries and illnesses and was paid her entire $80,000 salary. Coaxum and Trinidad traveled together to the Dominican Republic, West Virginia, and Florida, all the while claiming to be too sick to work. Eduardo Trinidad and Monica Coaxum were even planning their wedding during the time off, and their upcoming nuptials were scheduled for July 23rd in upstate New York at a swanky venue. Posting evidence, Coaxum reported injuring her shoulder, wrist, elbow, and knee, while Trinidad claimed he had hurt his knee, ankle, shoulder, wrist, fingers, hip, and elbow. The pair supposedly had several surgeries for their injuries and afterwards said they couldn't work due to trauma. Once the DOC caught wind of the scheme, the jig was up. Federal agents accessed their phone records and iCloud accounts, where they found Coxum bragging about defrauding her employer. In a group chat, she spoke about staying home and still getting paid. Each guard's union contract states that a Department of Corrections officer has unlimited paid sick leave for illnesses and injuries that make them incapable of doing their jobs. Once employees have been on sick leave for more than 8 days in 1 year, they can only leave their homes between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. This somehow ensures the system isn't being misused. How clever can the Department of Corrections be? The pair submitted hundreds of fraudulent doctor's notes and, worst of all, repeatedly broke the 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. restriction. Authorities arrested the trio in late 2022. Their charges included federal program fraud and cheating an organization that receives federal funds. Rikers Island is a notorious prison that's become quite known for being dysfunctional. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay right on this video for our past release to find out about even more prison guards who are just as crazy. Number 1. Contraband smuggling. Rio Morin thought she could outsmart the system by smuggling contraband and phones into a prison in the UK. But her luck ran out when cops raided her house and stumbled upon a treasure trove of illegal substances. As if that wasn't enough, the clueless delivery guy, Callum Riley, showed up mid-raid, trying to make a drop-off through the letter slot in her door. Morin's shady dealings came to light when she was nabbed by anti-corruption officers at the prison in November of 2020. Turns out, Morin wasn't acting alone. She was cahooting with an inmate named James Millington and his partner, Claire Anderson. Millington, doing time at a different UK prison, was the go-to guy for the illicit goods, while Anderson played a role in the scheme too. Morin, clearly unfazed by her impending prison stint, decided to try her hand at hairdressing while awaiting trial. Yep, you heard that right. She traded in her prison blues for a pair of scissors and started posting ads on Facebook looking for hairdressing gigs to practice her skills for beauty college. But Morin's newfound career path didn't save her from the long hair of the law. She ultimately pleaded guilty to her crimes: conspiring to supply illegal substances and phones to the prison, conspiring to convey contraband, and money laundering. The judge wasn't buying her sob story about being blinded by love or her attempt at a fresh start, slapping her with a 2-year sentence. As for her partners in crime, they didn't escape unscathed either. Millington got hit with a hefty 7 years and 9 months behind bars, while Riley got a year for his role in the shenanigans. In the end, Morin's attempt to play both sides of the law didn't quite pan out. As it turns out, crime doesn't pay, even if you're cutting hair on the side. Well, we mean crime pays at first, but then it doesn't pay anymore and you're in trouble. You get the idea. Who are a few of the worst cops who aren't fit to protect